of our life is run by our subconscious mind. Only 5% is run by our conscious mind. So think about the 5% is your willpower, the 95% is who you are and all your
That's a
conditioning and
good
processing.
percentage, right?
So if you only focus on the 5%, I always think of it's like you're taking an army of 5 versus an army of 95. Who's going to win?
Yes.
So if you can build that army of 95 that actually has your back and has the intention for what you want, which takes a lot of understanding of, okay, which habits, which behaviors, which stories have I told myself so many times that are my own subconscious mind, that if I start to tweak the subconscious mind, then when the conscious mind, defaults or doesn't have the capacity because you got a million things on your plate, which in the busy life that most of us lead, we do. And so then you can fall back on this. So that's why I moved away from the nutrition side, which is a lot of the conscious stuff, and more of the mindset and high performance side, which is really some deeper identity work for some men, because that underlying stuff, that's what moves the needle. And that is what creates true change.
Today, we're joined by Pat Smith. Pat is a business owner, entrepreneur, and high performance coach who helps other business owners and entrepreneurs level up both personally and professionally. But what makes his story especially powerful is the turning point that changed everything. In 2016, Pat hit rock bottom after a family tragedy, which forced him to take a hard look at his physical, mental, and emotional health. That experience led him to deeper work on mindset, identity, and building habits that actually move the needle. Pat has a lot of insight into what it takes to create lasting change, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Welcome to another installment of Be Your Own Boss. I'm your host, David Gambill, where we discuss a person's life and career and what got them to where they're at. Today, we have Pat Smith. He's a business owner and entrepreneur who coaches other business owners and entrepreneurs. Greetings and welcome, Pat. Introduce yourself to the audience and share your backstory and just how you got here.
Yeah. Thanks a ton for having me, David. Backstory goes back quite a bit, but for me personally, as a men's high performance coach, it really goes back decades. And I was chatting with you a little bit earlier, and we were talking primarily around how when I first got into personal development, really unbeknownst to myself, was when I started to go to the gym with my dad back all the way back when I was about 10 or 11. So I think from all the way back, putting back few decades ago, that's when I first started getting into understanding and really wanting to always be better and grow and learn. And I did it a lot through physical exercise, which is a staple for my life all the way up until this point, which, is definitely one of the pillars that has helped me get to where I am. But really, the backstory started for my career that I'm in right now. I was closer to around 2016. In 2016, I really hit rock bottom with some tragedy that went on with my family. And as a result, it really shook me to my core to make me look at not only my physical health, but my mental and emotional health, and what things was I doing or not doing, or what things was I using to avoid taking care of the things that actually need to be taken care of. So I went on my own personal development journey through understanding lots of things, and we'll go into potentially more detail through meditation, understanding how I was developing all these habits that I used to use all the time. And then as I started to use a lot of these tools and strategies and things to help myself become a better version, better human, better man, if you will, I saw that as I began to grow, my ability to show up in the workplace began to be better as well. And that was really transformative for me, because I noticed that in my peer group, the people that I was working with, my coworkers, even some of the people above me, my leaders, they were hitting ceilings in their ability to grow professionally. And as I started to take a reflection back on my own journey, what I saw was that I will always continue to be better at my job if as I think of myself as the cheat code to be able to actually become better. And so as I started to navigate a lot of that, I got into coaching in 2018, specifically around nutrition, because I felt, all right, if the people understand how to leverage nutrition, they can feel their body. When they feel their body right, they show up to work right. When they show up to work right, they can be better for their family, for their friends, hopefully for their team, all that good stuff. But I also noticed there was a deeper level of work that needed to be done. It was more on the identity level of actually being able to change beliefs, habits, behaviors that really, really was of interest to me and is what allowed for me to grow, which is why around 2020-ish, 2020, 2021 is when I started to transition more into understanding the internal work, the mindset work, the high performance habits, and things along those lines that actually push the needle forward for so many men. And then, after working in the corporate world for about 7, 8 years, a few different Fortune 1000 companies, I really wanted to like make this my life's mission. And I left my multi six figure high paying job back in October of 2022, and I've been doing what I do now ever since.
Right. Now, let's go back. I want to don't necessarily have to mention the tragedies, but is there
Mhm.
anything out of that that kind of maybe developed in your mind to be able to start taking that nutrition to the next level?
Yeah,
Or
well, it was a lot. It was the nutrition, it was understanding and utilizing meditation, and I think the biggest thing was really the precursor to all of that. My teen years, from about 14 to about 23, I was heavily involved with drugs and alcohol. Not just partying, but really kind of deep into that world. And what I came to realize after I hit rock bottom was most of all of that was just me actively avoiding the pain that I was feeling from other certain things that had gone on in my life. And when that tragedy hit, I noticed I went right back to those same habits, but only for so long until I ran out of money, and then I'm back stuck with myself trying to figure out what can I do to be better. And it was those type of things like meditation, understanding my emotions, getting a better in becoming better attuned to what exactly I was avoiding, and then being able to understand where that was coming from. And then, of course, the physical side, right? Nutrition, health, sleep, all of those things were accumulation of me feeling so anxious, overwhelmed, and disconnected for a really long time. But then once those things started to and get those ducks in a row, things started to really change and transform. And it really made me feel, and I've considered writing a book about it, is I felt truly like high on life. Like I was just
right.
all the natural things that I was doing, understanding how to take care of my sleep, using meditation to calm my nervous system down, to be able to not be so anxious all of the time. I realized that I would feel as good, if not better, than all the times when I was doing stuff that was not the right thing to be doing, if you will.
Was there anybody in that that kind of guided you through the challenging times, or was this kind of like a self?
No, it was just a self thing. Like I can recall it relatively vividly. I was like, Googling at the time. This is 2016. I'm like, what do you do if you're always anxious? And one of the things that I
Mm.
kept seeing all the time was meditation. And I'm like, whatever, meditation, what is that? Who cares? And then I was like, well, what do I have to lose? And so, that was it was more on a personal side. But then once I started to notice actual shifts, it started to make me think different. Over
Right.
time, I actually just posted something on my social media today. Over time, people start to judge you. At first, people start to judge you. Then they start to notice, okay, he's actually shifting. Then they get curious about it. And so that's the progression on getting people to really start to see things in the way that I did. But it was me first kind of leading that charge for a really long time.
So that was your kind of your friends group, or just
Yeah.
people that are following
Yeah.
you,
Yeah,
right?
friends groups, family, even, you have to when you're in those situations or in those circles, you don't necessarily have to cut everyone out, but you can't stay in the same environment and expect something
Right.
different to happen. So you do have to change some of your habits. And sometimes that meant not, going out every single night to go get drunk, or smoking a ton of weed and getting high and then avoiding everything that you need to be doing. And that was, that's challenging because then you go at, you think about the loneliness epidemic that we face as men, and so you're at it alone for a really long time. But I think now more than ever, it's, that's starting to become more apparent that connection for men is huge.
So it is as if the what do you think is first? So you think the mental aspects of it first, or at least
Hmm.
self-identification, as you mentioned about identity,
Yeah,
as the basis? Because there is a lot of willpower that needs to be involved
sure,
with that to
sure.
get out of that, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody tends. I have the same things. You tend to go back to your bad habits
Hmm.
with without you knowing it, because that, like you said, the friends group can be challenging,
Hmm.
especially if you have somebody that really you've relied on,
Yeah.
or somebody that's in that circle. And do you I know you said cut it out, but how do you I mean, how do you do that? I mean,
Well,
what was your biggest challenge for that?
yeah. I mean, biggest challenge was, like you said, you've been with these people or you've been around these people for a really long time. So it's one or two things. It's for many people, it just depends. I use the example oftentimes with nutrition. can you be in the house with all the snacks there and not go to the snacks? And that is, you said to some degree that's willpower, but it also is, if I identify as someone who really values my health, I can have that right next to me, and that's not going to impact me. But that takes some of that more deeper change, and that's what I found a lot of in the nutrition coaching was, yes, it was like, okay, I'm going to not eat those things, but that didn't change the person who actually wanted them. And so to your earlier question was, what's the first step? And I think there's two big things. First and foremost is awareness. And awareness is noticing that, okay, this part of me or this behavior or this how I operate is not congruent with what I say I want. And then the second part is the brutal honesty of being like, yeah, I say I want this thing and I do this thing. And so to your point, then it becomes, not just cut it out, but it's one step at a time. It's every time, all right, let's say, for instance, I really want to be healthy, but every time I go and do this, I'm
Yeah.
training my mind and my body that to everything I say doesn't necessarily matter. And so
Right.
it doesn't, so I'll do whatever. But the moment that I say I want to do this and I take just one step towards that, I'm now taking a vote. And when we think about neuroplasticity, which is more on the scientific side of things of like how we create behavior change, is when one pathway starts to disintegrate, the other one starts to build up. And so that's where the consistency, the willpower, and then in having that. But when your identity starts to change as well, that's where I would call it as double dipping in the work. You're actually helping yourself not have to rely solely on willpower, which does play a part. But if willpower is the only thing, and then
It doesn't always work.
blank hits the fan in life, guess what you're going to default back to? Your
Right.
habits or your
Well,
identity. But if you've changed your identity, then that becomes an easier way to do it.
yeah. Well, I think the one word that's starting to come up a lot in my head is a proximity,
Sure.
right? If the junk food is next to you or just a couple of steps away, that's more likely to
Hmm.
entice you beyond the willpower. As you mentioned, willpower is good, but it does not necessarily give you the habit you want,
Hmm.
right? You're
Yeah.
good for a few days, and then that third day, I said, "Oh, hell,
Yeah.
I'll just go and grab me a bag of whatever, and
Looks.
I'm good
Hmm.
for the next." And then all of a sudden, you're backsliding.
Right. And
That's
yeah.
good. I mean, that's one, and then also proximity to others
Hmm.
is the same thing. If
Sure.
somebody's coming over every time, they say, "Pat, let's go out. Let's go out, man."
Mhm.
And they know this. They know that they know you, and it's kind of like, how do you stop that if that same person keeps on nagging
Mhm.
you about it?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Again, I mean, we could go into all of that and boundaries, but I'll just kind of go back and just for the listeners is, and this is what, some of the stuff as a corporate trainer with Joe Dispenza, who's big into understanding neuroplasticity and the
Hmm.
neuroscience of change, specifically, in the Neuro Change Solutions, which is the company where we take it into the workplace is I want to think about 95% of our life is run by our subconscious mind. Only 5% is run by our conscious mind. So think about
Right.
the 5% is your willpower, the 95% is who you are and all your
That's a
conditioning and
good
processing.
percentage, right?
So if you only focus on the 5%, I always think of it's like you're taking an army of 5 versus an army of 95. Who's going to win?
Yes.
So if you can build that army of 95 that actually has your back and has the
Right.
intention for what you want, which takes a lot of understanding of, okay, which habits, which behaviors, which stories have I told myself so many times that are my own subconscious mind, that if I start to tweak the subconscious mind, then when the conscious mind, defaults or doesn't have the capacity because you got a million things on your plate, which in the busy life that most of us lead, we do. And so then you can fall back on this. So that's why I moved away from the nutrition side, which is a lot of the conscious stuff, and more of the mindset and high performance side, which is really some deeper identity work for some men, because that underlying stuff, that's what moves the needle. And that is what creates true change. Like you just said, 2 days, no snacks, fine. But you know what it is? It's like the internal devil on your shoulder, like, I
It's
know,
just one time. It's
I
just one time.
yeah, and it's also like, oh, I know how Pat it is. He'll commit for a couple weeks, and then in a couple weeks we're gonna throw a little bait out to him, and then we're just gonna reel him right back in, and it becomes a cycle. But if we understand when that bait's thrown out, and I can create the awareness to
Hmm.
notice it, and to just choose one small opposite direction pattern action, I am starting to change my internal dialogue on what that identification is around. And then
Right.
over time, with consistency, just like in the gym or any other habit, it becomes who you are as a person, right? You don't have to think about doing some of the things that you've done for a really long time because you've just done them. You don't really
Right.
know how to do them. You just you know how to do them, and you can sometimes you can't even explain that to certain people because you've done it so many times.
Well, yeah, it's like, what do you want me to do? That's natural to me, right? That's
Hmm.
it's kind of like they don't recognize it, which goes back to what you're talking about a few times about identity
Hmm.
and how what was the trappings of the identity that you need to get out of that really honed your person, right?
Well, what I realized was just unbeknownst to me, these weren't even things that I consciously always were thinking, but I just considered the proximity to the people I around, how I grew up, the words I heard with my parents around money, on money, stories around money, on what success is, good or bad. People who have money could potentially be bad, and I realized that those, if those never change, then my ceiling is only going to be to that point. And so I started to get really curious around what are a lot of those stories that I had. I use examples of like, going to the grocery store with my mom, and you have the generic ketchup and the regular ketchup, and the generic ketchup or the regular, the Heinz was too expensive. But that made me a perception that, money's hard to, you just start to come up with stories as a kid because you're trying to conceptualize and understand everything. Money's hard to come by. Man, 20 cents is 20 cents, and that's a big amount of money. So that can only limit me to what I really want to get to.
Right.
There was tons of other things like, am I going to be able to be this successful? Maybe I don't have the skills to do that. And so those are just certain patterns that I notice. But I would say what ends up happening is if we share those out loud or we're in conversation with people and we say them just in passing, but we do them enough times, they become who we are. They become, our mindsets, what we've burned
Right.
into our mind through our reticular activating system to see more of. It's, the red car analogy. You're familiar with that?
Yes. Well, if you
Yeah.
see one red car, all cars are red,
Yeah.
right? Or
Well,
if you thought about a red car, all of a sudden all cars that you see,
exactly.
you pick
So
out the ones that are
So
red.
yeah, so your
Yeah.
brain starts to focus on that. And
Yep.
I told you I had a client call earlier, and this came up, and I was challenging the client to really think beyond this. And I
Right.
asked him, I said, what would life be like, or how could you, he just was on this vacation in Costa Rica, and he's come back to work, and he was like, I was in such great relaxation mode, but the moment I come back to work, it's just it can't happen. I can never feel that way at work. But in that moment, that's the limiting belief or identity is I can't feel relaxed in
At
my
work.
home
Right.
or at work. And so the moment you say that, it's
You've
truth.
right.
Now you have limited yourself to only be able to see this amount of.
As
I
I
think of a
think of
pie graph. I like to think of
right.
pie like I'm very visual in that sense. Think of a pie graph. If I say I can't, I limit myself to this little 1%. I'm missing out on all the other ways that I could potentially reduce my stress in this area. But the moment he says I can't, right, it's cut off.
So you
And
cut off.
and
Right.
and so that's where I feel the mindset piece is so powerful, and we get so caught up in so many different areas around wanting to improve our health and better business strategies and scale the business. But that stuff only ever gets you to the level that you actually believe is possible, or you say, or your mindset is. And that's where the work now
Right.
that I do is, to me, is that's the real stuff that moves the needle. Because if you don't believe it, or if you tell yourself otherwise, you're going to find reasons to self sabotage your way out of it.
Well, going back to the identity, I mean, I've had that feeling and grew out of it as corporate
Hmm.
engineer. I'm an
Hmm.
engineering background.
Hmm.
And I associated myself too much with the corporation that I belonged to rather
Yeah.
than who I was, even though I
Right.
think I knew that, but it was always like, and I think it's part of that safety net, right? Oh, I've got a cushy job. I should just keep doing what I'm doing and just do I mean, I saw other engineers do that.
Hmm.
And so their total identification was, I want to do the 40 years at X
Hmm.
company and
Right.
not worry about something else. I had to break that and saying, I'm not a corporate engineer. I am David Gambill, right?
Hmm.
I am my own person to not, just as you said,
Yeah.
not limiting the ceiling. Is that something similar you encountered that in the corporate world that sometimes they put We were talking about, you mentioned boundaries.
Mhm.
Sometimes corporations want to keep you in a certain situation.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want you to go up, right? Because the old adage is that a corporation is a pyramid, right? There's
Mhm.
only so many seats above you. And so everybody's jockeying for those positions, whether you consciously know about it or not, it's
Mhm.
there. And so to say that you're going to go up those ladders without realizing that's the game you're in
Mhm.
limits you. If you just want to come in and punch the clock, that's totally different than
Right.
trying to do better and trying to grow as an individual.
Mhm.
What
Well,
what has that experience for you been like?
yeah, well, I agree in some aspects because the moment they get you super bought into the culture and you become that becomes your identity and that's just who you are, they've got you in that sense until you learn how to change out of it.
Right.
But what I realized was if you can be your own person and still be great at that, be your own person and not allow for your identity to get tied up in that, then you actually position yourself better. And here's what I mean. If my whole identity is my job, right? What happens when we're in a downturn? Now I'm
Yeah.
sad. Oh,
Yeah.
now we're winning. Exciting. And I'm on an emotional roller coaster. And right in that moment,
Yeah.
we have basically handed our card and our power away to something outside of us. And in that moment, we are no longer decisive for our own actions. We aren't able to handle our own emotions. We are saying that something or someone outside of us dictates how we think and feel. And too much of society and people in general, guys I work with in general, outsource a lot of it. And to me, that's what I would consider just victim mentality. You are letting someone or something else dictate you and then you get upset. Well, work made me feel this way. Work didn't make you feel this way. You let work make you feel this way. And
Right.
but the moment you can change that, now you keep yourself in this calm demeanor. Do you get frustrated still? Yes, we all do. We're human. We should feel
Yeah.
those emotions. If you don't, you got a real problem. Just kidding. But you should feel the emotions, right? You should be able to feel the emotions, but you don't want to stick there forever. And that's what I
Right.
noticed in my last job was my ability to understand who I was as a person, to keep myself really I don't take out the word balance, regulated or coherent so that I could think straight. My emotions could be set where they needed to. When we were up and down in this, it was pretty much like a startup to some degree. When we were really, really ramping things up, I was able to stay heavy even when the chaos was going on around me. Yeah, so the question then I feel becomes if you know that your identity is tied up into work, if you were able to switch it into just owning it who you are and work as a part of you, not your entire being, how does that change how you show up? How does it change how you are able to be impacted for better or for worse at work? And then what position does that put you in to be the best who you are? Because like I said, what I found was that emotional roller coaster is all based off, how tied up and how emotionally invested you are. It doesn't mean that you can't be excited about it. It's just if you're in that piece all of the time, then now you've pretty much given your power away and your identity is tied up into something else besides who you are. And what you shared a little bit sounded like you've been in that realm before.
Yeah. I mean, just an example. I mean, in a very large corporation, you're tending to feel the folks above you. And well, at the tail end of my job career at that company, it started to get a little bit understanding that they were fearful themselves. And
Mm,
so they were not giving me a good enough indication of if I were going to stay or going to go. Cause I did get a warn notice. I called around the entire company and I felt like was running scared because
mm,
they did not have a good understanding of where they were
interesting.
within the company and that bottom dollar, right? It was all about
Mhm,
money. It was all about everything was moving to the lowest common denominator, which was labor cost.
mhm,
So, or, unions, getting out without the unions or getting without into a location that more fitted. But they didn't really care if the employees moved with it, right?
mhm,
They said, oh, you could stay there. We'll just hire people at the new location. So people
sure.
were running scared. People were not, kind of had basically created their own little fiefdom. And so they feel threatened that that was going to be upended.
Mhm,
And so you started feeling that sense of fear at every level,
yeah.
and everybody was scurrying to take cover, more or less.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
so it was very, very eye opening that, you know, you almost feel the tides are changing as far as you have to be, as my podcast says, you have to be your own boss. You have to be your own boss, your own identity to weather that storm because safety and security net is not there anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's the number one thing now. And one of my friends, he talks about this often. He's a keynote speaker. His name's John Sinet. And he talks about, for a really long time, we based everything off you were really good at your job if you had a high IQ. And then for a long time, we talked about EQ. As a leader, you want to have good emotional intelligence. Still very valid. But now, more than ever, it's important to have AQ, adaptability quotient. Are you able to be ready to change when the tides turn as quickly as possible, and can you navigate that change? But here's the catch. If your entire company, and this happens in all of society, is running on fear, anxiety, worry, we're in a and this is on the scientific side, but when we are in a brainwave state where we cannot comprehend new information, we can't learn new information. So if I'm running full steam ahead, anxious all the time, but I also want to change, right? Is a lot of incongruency. So if the individual, the leaders, the team members, the directors, the employees, and companies taught this on how they could get acclimated to lower their brainwave state, just lower themselves to be more regulated, they would be more adaptable. If they were more adaptable, they could change quicker. If they could change quicker, they could make more money. And that's what they're all about, anyways. And so that's why I think so much of my work is, even though I work with the guy, I was talking to the guy today, and their big goal, his CEO, he's a COO. He said that their COO or CEO really wants to sell the company for $1 billion. Now, are they there yet? Not yet, but they're on the path that it could be realistic a handful of years down the road. But the truth is, what I told him, I said, look, that's amazing, but every single person, it needs to be a human first organization, because every single one of those people is going to be able to need to have the capacity to hold that level of pressure and now hold that level of change and involvement that's going to happen if you're going to get to that point. If these things aren't in order, getting to that is going to be a very, very tough uphill battle. But getting to that point with the people that are doing the right things, that understand these mechanisms on how to basically max out their human potential, if they will, are going to help that pathway become that much easier. So to me, it's so much more of the person first. I'm not focusing on telling him what to do in his business, because I don't know what he knows in his business. But I know the moment he grows personally, professionally, in his marriage, and some of these other areas, it is only a matter of time before that rolls into him being able to show up better for his team, for his company, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Pat, kind of concluding for this. So, what is your kind of vision for your business and your personal growth
Mhm.
for the audience to kind of understand maybe what do you have now and what's your kind of future perspective on what's going on?
Sure. So on the personal side, some big vision is, I'm getting married. We're engaged, but we're going to be married
Congrats.
in the next 12 months. So shortly going to have a family after that, or at least that's the plan. And personally for me, when I started my business, I also kept in mind, was future focused on how do I want to live my life and have my work and life integrated in a way that I can have the time off, that I can have the flexibility, build my own schedule. So that's first and foremost personally for me. Those are some of the big nuggets or things that I'm after over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. And then for me on the professional side of things, is just continue to work with business owners and entrepreneurs who see that we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are the cheat code to us getting to the next level. And when they're willing to invest in themselves, understand the patterns that are holding them back, break through them, they can actually get to the next level of success. I'm looking to continue to coach those type of guys, specifically men. And then on top of that, one other thing that I'm really passionate about is continue to build out a network of men to support one another in this journey. And we talked about it earlier. When you're in these, trials, tribulations, growth
Right.
stages, you shed off a lot of people and you're not sure where the other people are at. So I'm really looking to continue to build that. I have a whole community of around 800 guys on a specific platform that I'd love to share with anybody in the audience to join. It is 100% free right now. But again, to continue to have that support in the background, because I know that if I had that when I was in that stage 10 years ago, it would have helped me tremendously. So those are the things that I'm after in the course of the next little bit here.
Well, it sounds great, Pat. I appreciate your time. I know that maybe in the future, maybe we can talk again and see how that's progressing after getting
Yeah,
married
that'd
and
be amazing.
having all the other elements in your life kind of situated and taken care of.
Yeah,
We'll
no, I
share the
appreciate it.
information for your websites and stuff below in the comments. And I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.
Pat, thank you for sharing your story and for the powerful reminders about identity, mindset, and what it truly takes to create lasting change. There's a lot here for anyone trying to grow, level up, or break out of old patterns. I appreciate your time and the perspective you brought to this conversation. We'll share your links and information below so listeners can connect with you. Thanks again for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube so you never miss a new conversation. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, reach out anytime at info@gnggdesignllc.com. Until next time, keep designing your life your way.